it was hard
Been
because
planning
I
a long
hadn't,
time, I believe it.
and I
I had to get a
hadn't
bigger
watched
mailbox
it,
to
so
fit all the ballots
But
I've
I
been
got
getting
laid
mailed to me.
off.
It's just,
Oh, that's, yeah,
I thought,
it's just
man.
insane.
not much you can
Why are you
do
getting
about
mail?
I'm
that.
just
Nope,
kidding.
no.
Okay,
I'm
everyone,
supposed to, and
I'm
I
going to
never-
call the Planning Commission meeting to order and ask you all to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one
nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Sally, if you'd help us with the roll call, please.
Certainly. Mayor Kent Atwell,
Present.
Alderperson Tim Eicher,
Here.
Dave Greenway,
Here.
Dan Jaschinski,
Here.
Ed Merrick,
Here.
Jim Ryer,
Here.
Laura Schultz,
Here,
Bob Weiler.
Here.
We also have planner Amy Barrows with us and Scott Hessinger, the building inspector. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay, the first order of business today is a public hearing number 1, zoning district map amendment, rezone. Jeffords Family Limited Partnership, Schultz Family Properties LLC, Kettle Court Circle, 3820 Kettle Court East, City of Delafield. Applicant, City of Delafield. Rezone several properties from B4 General Business District to the M1 Limited Industrial District in order to be consistent with the zoning and uses on the remaining lots on Kettle Court East. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this public hearing? Is there anyone that would like to speak to this public hearing? Seeing none, this public hearing is now closed. Okay, we'll move on to item 1 on the agenda, approved Planning Commission meeting minutes of August 26, 2020.
Move to approve.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. Okay, item number 2, City of Delafield citizens' comments pertaining to subjects on the consent agenda. Just the consent agenda. Any comments? Seeing none, citizens' comments for the consent agenda are now closed. We'll move on to item number 3, consent agenda.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes. So anybody that is on the consent agenda, you are now approved and can leave unless you'd like to stay for the rest of the meeting. Anybody not sure if they're on the consent agenda? Okay. If it was on the consent agenda.
Yep.
Thank you for coming. Okay, we'll move on to item 4, City of Delafield citizens' comments pertaining to items on or off the agenda. Is there any citizens that would like to make comments for any items on or off the agenda?
Is that Rob Miller?
Yep.
You're out.
All right, we're done already?
We're done. You're done.
Oh, thank you, guys.
Don't even sit.
Sorry for being late.
Do you have any
Just
citizens'
about to
comments? Any citizens'
No,
comments?
you guys are great. Have a good night.
All righty, seeing no citizens' comments are now closed. Okay, we will move to number 5, unfinished business. Recommended for discussion and possible action. All the properties I listed before on Kettle Court East, applicant is requesting the Planning Commission discuss and provide a recommendation to the Common Council regarding a rezone of several properties from B4 General Business District to the M1 Limited Industrial District in order to be consistent with the zoning and uses on the remaining lots on Kettle Court East. Amy?
I'm just noticing, I don't believe the staff report is in the packet, but it's the same staff report that we had 2 months ago. This is the property, a few properties on Kettle Court East where we realized through a review of an application that the properties are zoned B4, whereas that area is primarily manufacturing, and so we wanted to match the zoning for the entire neighborhood to M1. And we did not receive any concerns at the last meeting and don't have the public comment here. I think in the report it just commented on how one owner asked how his taxes would be, or his assessment would be impacted, and the assessments are based on actual use, not the zoning. And then another owner just wanted to make sure it didn't impact what he could do on the property, and the M1 district is more flexible than the B4, so there are no negative impacts.
So you're looking for a motion?
Yes, please.
I'll make a motion to approve it.
I'll second. I'll just say that you answered my questions or possible concerns is what correspondence have we had? I haven't seen any other than what you just said, so it's all good to me.
Alrighty, is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passes.
And I just wanted to be sure you knew that's a recommendation to the Common Council in that motion, correct?
That's what I heard.
Thank you.
Yeah, me too.
Clear.
Thank you, Sally.
You're welcome.
Okay. Item 6, new business. Item recommended for discussion and possible action. 2673 Zastro Road, Delafield. Owner Jerry Benusa. Applicant Peter Pope. Applicant seeks approval for replacement of existing boathouse. We have the applicant here today. Please come on up and sit in one of the chairs and let us know your name and address. And please speak directly into the microphone so that the people in TV land and YouTube land can hear you. Amy, you want to give us an overview?
Sure. So I'll be brief. The report is a little bit longer, but the property is 55,122 square feet, and it's on the east side of Lake Nagawaki. The applicant is proposing to replace an existing boathouse. There are pictures in the packet. The only differences really are that it's 8 inches higher. There's going to be a railing. There already is a railing on the boathouse, but this railing will probably be less impactful in that it will contain horizontal wiring instead of the vertical boards. The materials and colors of the boathouse will match the residence. There will be a new staircase on the back of the boathouse. The previous boathouse did not have that staircase. And then the applicant has agreed to slightly modify the framing so that they will meet the side yard setback, which is 6 feet. The existing boathouse is ever so slightly non-conforming, but it's always good to bring structures into conformance when possible. So they can do that without too much of a challenge. And then I just wanted to remind you, since I don't believe you get a lot of boathouse requests, what the Plan Commission's role is, and that's really to just consider the location, the architectural design, color, and material, and make sure that it's compatible with the principal structure in the surrounding neighborhood. And then the ordinance does also require rainwater remediation, and then make sure that it's also compatible with the lakeshore setting, and address any neighbors' comments and Lake Welfare Committee comments. We didn't receive any negative or neighboring comments, negative or positive. There is a boathouse on the adjacent property that's directly adjacent to the subject boathouse. So we, with the materials matching the existing structure, it's a replacement of an existing boathouse, and the fact that there's a boathouse on the neighboring property, it seems to be compatible with the surroundings and wouldn't have a greater impact on the lake. The ordinance does have specific rain garden provisions requiring compliance with state technical standards and then species requirements. Our engineer has been working with the applicant, and it sounds like as of like 4 or 5 this afternoon, the issues have been resolved. So the boathouse, not the boathouse, the rain garden will be a little bit larger in size. It says on here, it looks like 73 square feet. The rain.
7 by 11 by 7, 7 to 7.
Okay, 11 by 7 square feet. And then there's some construction components to it. So he will meet that. And then I need to review the species that are being proposed, because that was just submitted later this afternoon. But I assume that will not be a problem to bring the rain garden standards and vegetation into conformance. The Lake Welfare Committee did review and approve the proposal, subject to the coach lights being downcast toward the lake. And so we did, or I have a recommendation for approval, subject to several conditions, which are really just assurance that the code is being complied with. that the boathouse be used for the storage of marine and accessory items used by the occupants only. No human habitation is permitted. There shall be no plumbing in the boathouse. It's limited to an outdoor hose bib and shower. The rooftop deck railing shall not exceed 4 feet in height and be at least 50% open. The boathouse location, size, and design shall comply with the plans that were submitted to the Plan Commission. The illumination shall not extend beyond the property boundaries and shall only produce downcast light. The city engineer has to review the rain garden for compliance with the DNR technical standards. That's been done. And then I do have a recommendation in here. This is not part of the ordinance, at least that I could see, but that a deed restriction be reviewed and approved and recorded with Register of Deeds detailing the specifications and maintenance. The reason why that is in there is it's at least been my experience that as soon as property ownership switches hands, the next owner really has no idea why that rain garden is there. And if that's not their liking and they would prefer a mowed lawn, they're just going to remove it. So this is the most effective way I've found that will automatically put future owners on notice that that's there for a reason and it has to be maintained in perpetuity unless they would come back to the city and be able to comply with a new ordinance that wouldn't require it for some reason. That same condition, this is from the ordinance, says that the installation establishment of the rain garden shall be completed within 6 months of the boathouse completion and prior to occupancy and final inspection. I need to review the rain garden planting list and density, which those specifications are written in the ordinance. And the boathouse shall be placed on a code-compliant permanent foundation that extends below the frost line or be placed on a slab, which I believe they have it planned according to the code requirements. Any questions?
That was the most thorough boathouse review I've ever heard.
But I have a question.
Well, just a second. So, I'm sorry, did you give us your name and address, or did I miss it?
No, it's Peter Pope from SJ Pope Design and Renovations.
Okay.
You want my address?
Just whatever address you want to give us.
4866 Hewitt's Point Road, Oconomowoc.
Great. Do you have anything to add to what the...
Not much to add to that.
Okay.
And the reason why I'm putting the specifications in here is it's just my understanding you don't review these very often, and I think it's important for you to be aware of what you're supposed to be considering as part of your review.
Excellent.
What is the
Excellent.
Review.
What are the technical standards?
What are they?
Yep.
That's new to us. We're not
It's
used to
multiple
hearing that.
pages. It's a DNR technical.
Okay, but that's not what the code was written on.
I believe it says DNR technical standards in the ordinance.
It was written on the DNR pamphlet, if you will, that is on our website.
Okay, so that is interesting because they do have design standards now,
But
and it
those
is
are
new.
those are for the county,
That's for,
It's
not for the size project.
unincorporated area.
It's just a statewide technical standard. So they have what's happening here is this is really like a stormwater feature, and it's just if you don't want to meet that, then I was under the impression it was the DNR
That's
technical
not, yeah,
standards.
but that's not what the code was written on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we can go with we can do it differently. I will say their original proposal was a 15 square foot rain garden, which I don't know if, it doesn't seem like that would accommodate the rooftop drainage, where the technical standard was intentionally it was simplified for individual property owners to be as simple as possible. And I think you were able to get through it within the last 24 hours, so.
Correct, yes.
And it is more appropriately sized if you look at the screen. It was very small.
That was my
But-
issue with the rain garden, when it said you couldn't get the code amount of plants in a 3x5. Something's out of whack here, but if they worked it out,
Yeah.
it's
It
so
just seems like
similar to the old one, and I respect what the Lake Welfare Committee has done with this one.
Yeah.
But I don't
But
want
Dave,
this.
remember, Dave's
But
on the
we've
Lake
got-
Welfare Committee,
Right,
and he's
and we-
sharing the
In fact-
information from the Lake
Well, it was
Welfare Committee.
unanimous.
There's two of us here who wrote it.
And I think that maybe that has to be in this.
No, because it's getting too big. Now, I'm not saying the size is wrong, because I didn't size this based on the pamphlet that we have on our website. As long as it complies with that pamphlet, I don't have a problem.
Okay.
Because any individual should be able to go and look at that and find out how big it's gonna be.
Yeah.
Do you?
Not needing an engineer to do it for them.
Do you want to change that condition to comply to, and the pamphlets, they have changed too on the DNR site, just so you know? So if then we just need to make sure we're referring to what the city has.
Whichever one was on our site should it's out there. You can't find that on the DNRs because it's on the Minnesota site.
Okay. I mean, I didn't know that, so
Yeah, no.
I'm
So
happy
what
with
changes
this.
do we need to make for
Moving
future
above and beyond,
boathouses?
no complaints.
I guess that's what I'm getting at.
Well, one's going to be a lot more. If they're using the technical, only an engineer can do it.
I'm just asking you, what change would you like to see made that?
I'd like it to see the pamphlet
the
so that
most
it's
current
easy to
pamphlet.
understand for the homeowner.
And
Yeah,
that's what we've
I-
been using in the past.
And we've used it in the past for
For every boathouse for the last,
I'm
I don't
fine
know,
with
10
that.
years.
10 years.
Yeah, and just to clarify with that technical standard, it was actually written so an engineer wouldn't have to do it. So it's doing a really simple calculation to accommodate the first half-inch of rainoff from the square footage of rooftop. And that half-inch of rainoff, it's been demonstrated is the most polluted water, and after the half-inch, it's pretty clean water. So that is where it's coming from. And I think Peter did it all. It's just Brian reviewed it to make sure it complied.
And I think the pamphlet even says to do a test on how fast the water percolates.
Okay.
We're just trying to make it, we just want to be, we don't want to be building a boathouse to become, a bureaucratic
Yeah.
billing nightmare, right?
I think that merits further review between lake welfare and
That's what I'm
coming back to us.
That-
But I'm comfortable with changing number 6 to say that on the list of recommendations, that the rain garden sized as presented, and that they work with staff on an agreed amount of and type of vegetation. I mean, for this particular applicant.
Yeah.
But I think we do need to, if there is a finer tuned technical standard that does meet the simplicity directive that Lake Welfare gave when they put it in place.
Yeah.
Maybe that is the way to go as a formula as opposed to a possibly changing kind of a PR pamphlet.
Yeah. So Dave, will you take that back to the Lake Welfare Committee and work with the chairman
Yeah,
and
if I can
have
get a
that?
copy of the new technical.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Then I had something I wanted to bring up.
The bathrooms.
Yeah, the bathroom. So in here, I'm trying to look at what number it is.
Oh, no plumbing?
Yeah.
Yep.
So it says here, the boathouse is,
Its
shall have no
recommendation
plumbing in the boathouse. The boathouse is limited to an outdoor hose bib and shower only. I mean, what the code says is a boathouse may not be used for human occupancy or habitation. This let me start it over again. This prohibition expressly forbids the installation of a bathroom, facilities, and other amenities typically found in a primary residence. So it's not allowing plumbing, meaning sewer and water. What it's saying is you just can't have a bathroom facility. So if you want to run sewer to the boathouse, you can. If you want to run water to the boathouse, you can. Some people have put in fish cleaning stations and sewer for various reasons to be able to remove the water from the boathouse. And there aren't any restrictions that you could only do a shower or only do a hose bib. So I don't know if you were considering bringing, sewer lines to the boathouse or not, but the code doesn't prohibit you from doing that.
We're really looking at outdoor hose bib.
Okay, which is fine. But I just want to clarify that for future boathouses and so forth, that, that's how the Lake Welfare Committee wrote that on purpose,
Yeah.
to be able to allow sewer into the boathouse. Okay, any other
Amy, I have a
thing?
question. When must the rain garden be installed? Is it within 6 months of completion or prior to occupancy?
It says, I wrote it per the code, shall be completed within 6 months of the boathouse completion and prior to occupancy and final inspection.
Isn't that a contradiction?
Well, I think it's like both, isn't it? Because you can't get occupancy until,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that was the intent. You can't get occupancy until the rain garden is there.
Yes.
And 6 months means if you start construction now, you're not gonna get occupancy until spring, until that rain garden's in, even if the boathouse is done.
Okay, so I
But
probably,
it
it's
would be
a-
completed before we'd be able to install the rain garden in the spring.
Or you can install the rain garden first.
Yeah, all you have to do is just say completed prior to occupancy.
Yeah,
So, right, I mean,
yeah. The thing was, we didn't want it to go on and not get it installed. So that when he walks down there, there's the rain garden.
yeah, right.
If he doesn't see the rain garden, then he doesn't issue the boathouse
Right.
occupancy. So we'll have that change, Tim's change, and then my change was to strike item number 2.
But he wants a hose bib, right? So why would you strike that?
The wording is limiting what he can do, and
I
it
see
shouldn't
what
be
you're saying.
limited.
I got it.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'd make a motion to approve based on what all the changes are.
well,
Who
does
kept track of that?
Okay, Sally, you with us
Sally have it
here?
all?
Your motion is to approve the boathouse, striking item number 2.
Changing number 6 to just the DNR pamphlet that's on our website.
And the size
And the
is presented.
size as presented here.
And then changing the 6 months to occupancy?
Yeah.
Date of occupancy.
Prior to occupancy.
Prior to
Can't get
Prior
prior
to
to occupancy.
Size is presented, the original size?
No,
It's 11
this
by
one.
The
7.
new one, okay, so that was
size
presented
presented here
today.
today.
Presented at the meeting?
So it shall be
Yes,
completed within
11 by
6 months
7.
and prior to occupancy?
No, just prior to occupancy
Sally's
permit.
having a hard time. Everyone's
I think I've
talking.
got them all, but I feel more comfortable reading them back.
Please.
Dave moved to approve based on all the changes. We're going to do that approval by striking number 2. We're going to change item number 6 to the DNR, I'll reference it better, but it's to the DNR pamphlet on the current City of Delafield website, and the size of the rain garden as presented at this meeting. And we're changing the 6 months to just having it there prior to occupancy.
Correct.
For this
Yes.
particular project only. Okay.
Yes.
Great, is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Any discussion?
Just a point of clarification, so the size of the rain garden is approved based on 7 by 11, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
7 by
Yep.
11.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Looking forward to the new boathouse.
Great, thank
It'll be
you.
a great
Thank you.
improvement.
Thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Item number 7, zoning and ordinance revisions. Items recommended for discussion. Discussion potential code amendments related to special exceptions and plan development. No action will be taken. Okay, Amy, wonderful
boy.
article. It's going to
Okay.
require a lot of thinking, so everybody get
Yes.
your thinking hats on.
And decisions do not have to be made tonight, but let's just start talking about this, and I would like to get some ideas from you all. But just to start, several months ago, we had a case that came up related to special exceptions, and I think it was Jim who asked that I prepare a brief memo regarding what the difference is between a variance and a special exception. So in the packet, there is a memo. It was prepared actually a little while ago, but As that was getting written, we realized that some of the language in the ordinance, that there's some gaps in the language, and that this is a really good time to potentially make some tweaks to the text. So if we go back to the memo, I think it's important to first just describe the difference between the variance and special exception, which we have done briefly, but just as a reminder to help with the text amendment discussion. Variances are sought through the Board of Adjustment, or Zoning Board of Appeals. I apologize, I'm used to Board of Adjustment.
So
Zoning
this
Board
is
of
the
Appeals.
June 29th memo.
It's a June 29th memo. And essentially what the Board of Adjustment is responsible for doing is considering requests that are otherwise prohibited in the ordinance. So the Plan Commission, the City Council, staff, Scott and I, none of us have the ability to allow something that does not comply with the ordinance. So in order to do something that does not comply, they need to go through the Zoning Board of Appeals process. And in order to get approval for a variance, the Zoning Board of Appeals is supposed to be looking at, well, they're required to make sure that the request complies with several tests identified in state statutes. And what those tests include, the most important component, I believe, is the unnecessary hardship test. So the applicant essentially has to prove that not granting the variance would cause an unnecessary hardship or be unnecessarily burdensome to them. That typically means that they can't practically use the property for the permitted purpose. There's not enough space to build the residence when it's a residentially zoned property. So in doing so, the board is supposed to be looking at providing minimal relief necessary in order to allow that person to occupy the property, which would, mean giving some relief to the dimensional standards typically, but they need to make sure that there's no impact on the general interest, safety, health, and welfare, and then that it's not, that it is an unusual circumstance. So if there's a circumstance that's commonplace, perhaps, I know RL2 zoning, there's a lot of properties that are not, that don't conform with the lot size requirements. If the Zoning Board of Appeals has seen the same request over and over and over again and it's not unique, then the ordinance should really be amended to reflect the true circumstances out in the field. So these are supposed to be unique circumstances.
Can I interrupt?
Yes.
I know this very well. I would like to interject that there are two types of variances.
Yes.
That there is for area,
Right.
and the other is for use, which is very difficult to get.
Yeah, so that was actually going to be the next thing that I mentioned is the city's ordinance is a little bit lagging in statutory requirements. So there's always been a differentiation between use and area variances. Area variances are really the type of variances that we're going to be talking about, and that kind of are similar to special exceptions other than the standards are different. Use variances should be an extremely difficult test to meet because there presumably is another zoning district that could accommodate that particular use. And so you have to demonstrate that you have no reasonable use of the property at all without that variance. A couple of years ago, I can't remember the year exactly, the statutes were changed to specifically define the two differences and define the criteria differently between the two. That's not in the code yet. We'll get to that another day because the focus here really isn't on the variance, it's on the special exception. So the code does need to be amended to reflect those statutory changes though. Then special exceptions are a little bit different in that they go to the Plan Commission and in one circumstance the Common Council as well. And a special exception is really the ordinance is saying that it's an allowance that can occur, but it has to go to the Plan Commission because there might be a special circumstance or there are certain standards that should be met in order to allow it. So it's not always allowed. It's if you can meet certain standards, you can have it. So they don't have to meet those hardship tests, and the regulations aren't subject to statutory requirements. I will say the ordinance does not have a definition for special exception, and it's a pretty important term, so I would highly recommend that a definition be added. And it is different than the term exception. There's plenty of circumstances in the ordinance where somebody can get an exception can be approved by the Plan Commission. That's not the same as a special exception. So just keep that in mind. There are only two places in the ordinance where special exceptions are allowed, and that's for non-conforming lots and the lake frontage provision, which we'll get into when we talk about the code amendments more. But in looking at the code, the process for the 2 times it's allowed are different. One only goes to the Plan Commission, one goes to the Plan Commission for recommendation to Common Council. And I guess there too, I would highly recommend that the process be the same for a special exception. You know, whatever you choose, it should either be one or the other.
Could I
Does that
interrupt
make
again?
sense? Yes.
I have Hamas's notes here from a past meeting, and he states in there that with a special exception, you cannot use it to create a use. And you have that on you have structural / use. It cannot be used to create a use, a special exception.
Could you speak a little louder? I couldn't hear you.
Okay, a special exception cannot be used to create a use. It can only use for like dimensionals. You know, it's supposed to be a minor when it is an exception. That's what, it acts kind of like a conditional use in a way, but it's supposed to be something minor. And you don't do multiples of it. Because if you're going to do multiple exceptions for a piece of property, you should consider changing your code then.
And you can define, I mean, that's why the definition is really important. People actually use special exceptions differently. Some communities use special exceptions like conditional uses. Others use it as a simpler exception to the ordinance compared to a variance. So they're actually, they can be looked at a little bit differently, but Laura's right. I mean, it's meant to be a minor deviation from the code and allowed through a special circumstance and we're trying to define what those circumstances are a little bit more clearly. So we can certainly take use out and make sure it's not reflected in the definition as well. Okay, so any other questions on the difference between the two?
Nope.
Moving on. Okay, so with special exceptions, I guess the first thing that we're recommending, and Scott and I talked about this quite a bit beforehand, would be to define special exception. And what I did is I looked at about 4 or 5 different ordinances that do define special exception, and they're actually all read very, very similarly. And so I just tweaked it to fit what you guys have going on. So I can quick read it because if you guys agree with this one, we could probably move forward with proposing a text amendment. So the definition that we're recommending here is a request for a minor adjustment to the requirements of this ordinance only where specifically authorized by the ordinance owing to special conditions of the property. In granting of a special exception, the approving body must consider whether the proposed special exception would be hazardous, harmful, noxious, offensive, or a nuisance to the adjacent properties, surrounding neighborhood, and natural resources. The approving body may impose such restrictions or conditions they deem necessary for the protection of adjacent properties, surrounding neighborhood, natural resources, and public safety, interest, and welfare.
So it doesn't say uses, right?
In there, I'm sorry, I would suggest before natural resources, change and to or.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think you could say natural resources could be this singular reason why we'd say no.
Sure.
I'm sorry, if I interrupted you.
No worries. So it doesn't say the word use in there.
No.
Right? And then, just so I'm clear on this, the only place this definition is going to apply, because it's the only place special exceptions are in the code currently, is for non-conforming lots and lakefront properties.
That's correct. And that's why it says in there only where specifically authorized in the ordinance. You can't just call out a special exception randomly.
Right. And I believe you have to have those listed also.
Yes, and they are, so there's only 2 sections where it's allowed, where they would be allowed. Okay?
You have to list what those special, should list in the ordinance, the special exceptions.
You mean in the definition?
Yeah.
Okay, we can do that.
Also, you should list in there that an applicant needs to present a document of application with substantial evidence supporting the granting of a special exception.
Laura, could you repeat that? I just can't quite hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm a little hoarse. No applicant, no applicant document of application, no, an applicant has to present an application stating with substantial evidence supporting why they want the granting of a special exception. So an applicant has to tell you why they, and why specifically they want a special exception. And that's done with an application, through an application.
So I will, with that, I mean, I think that's a really good comment. I would like to ask Jim where it fits, because you should be careful not putting standards in the like those kinds of standards within the definition.
Right.
So
But I don't think that's
noted.
outrageous to ask an applicant, what do you want a
Right.
special exception for?
Right, I just don't know if it goes in like these individual sections or in a separate little, we'll figure it out. But it's good language. Okay. Now, specific to existing non-conforming lots, right now, the way the code reads is it just simply says you can get a special exception from any developmental regulation there is if your lot's non-conforming, which is really open-ended, especially when lots can be non-conforming for different reasons, and there really is no justification for certain developmental relief. So I guess with that, but there are some standards. There can't be impacts to grading and drainage, adjoining properties in the neighborhood, and conditions may be imposed to protect adjacent properties, surrounding neighborhood, and public interest and welfare. That is already in the ordinance. So we will, keep that language in the code, but we just are considering adding additional. So Scott and I talked about how in order to create that greater level of consistency and protection of the surrounding properties and public interest, that we get pretty specific with each type of dimensional relief that someone would propose. And consistency is really important because otherwise you're just going to have all different kinds of decisions throughout the city. So one is if, when you're dealing with floor area ratio and open space for that matter, those special exceptions should only be granted when the property is not conforming to size, because that's the circumstance in which would justify it. It's not big enough to meet the floor area and open space standards. So if the property is only non-conforming to the width standard, for example, you wouldn't even be able to apply for floor area or open space. So some specific standards that we were considering is, it sounds like, and this is where, Scott's the lead because I'm newer to the city, most of the non-conforming lots are in the RL2 district, which is your smallest lake lot. And they may be, I think commonly, maybe in the 7,500 square foot range versus the required 10,000 square foot range. So focusing on that, I don't want to go through this in great detail, but we thought that the provision of, first, the buildings on a lot shall not exceed 4,000 square feet. What that is, it's the minimum amount allowed for the smallest conforming lot in RL2. 4,000 square feet would be allowed on a 10,000 square foot lot. So you can't have that, or a floor area ratio of 0.45, whichever is more restrictive. So, in here are some examples of what you would run into. And so if you got into that like 9,000 square foot lot where you're slightly less non-conforming, the floor area of 0.45 would be would provide greater relief. And so we're restricting it to that's why we're restricting it to the 4,000. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Yep.
Okay. Does everyone like that provision if we move forward with proposing code language? Okay. Then it gets a little bit trickier when you get into the other districts. I don't know how many non-conforming lots the city has in these other zones. But if
Scott?
It would be the RL1 district where you have non-conforming lots that don't meet the minimum, that don't have the minimum lot width.
okay, so that, you don't think so much on lot size though?
And I have a few RL1 lots, not on the lake, not sure why they're zoned RL1, that don't have the minimum lot width or lot size.
Okay.
Not many.
So, a couple of options there. You could say the same kind of thing where you can't have the square footage any larger than the minimum size. I mean, that makes sense anywhere, minimum size of a conforming lot. You could restrict it to, again, no more than 0.05 ratio. I mean, so it could read similarly. What made me nervous about that is if you had like an R1 lot, a lot that requires 30,000 square foot minimum, and it was severely non-conforming, you shouldn't have too many of those. But if you do severely non-conforming, then only allowing 0.05 relief from 0.20 floor area maybe, it would be really restrictive. And so there's just that fair ratio is difficult to accommodate unless that's not an issue in the city. If it's not an issue, we could probably stick to what's very similar in the RL2 district, allowing 0.05 additional relief or the minimum.
I think the format should be the same. It's just the standards, the actual numeric standards need to be confirmed.
Okay. So maybe with that, Scott and I do a little more research on scrolling through the city lots to see where we have, nonconformity.
That would help. I mean, that's the biggest thing that's my one question would be, do we have a lot where this is an issue
Yeah.
that's not developed?
And I know where the non-conforming RL1 lots are.
Okay.
And there aren't that many. Yeah, we
Okay.
could deal with non-conforming lot width because they have a lot of lot area. So they have the ability to design a house that complies and it still allows, quiet enjoyment of your property. We have a handful of RL1 lots, not on the lake, on Agawicka Road, that were platted in 1908 that don't have the minimum RL1 lot width or lot area. And
Okay.
those, believe it or not, are coming into play right now. They're
Oh.
being sold. So that's how I know about them.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's look.
And I'm talking about like 3 or 4 lots.
And I think that's an example of, is it unique? Maybe that's a circumstance where RL1 isn't the appropriate zoning, I don't know. But maybe it's not the appropriate zoning district.
And I think it's likely not appropriate, but I can show those to you.
Yeah. So if you like the format of what we did with RL2, we can kind of roll that with the rest of them, or maybe it's not necessary for some. Okay. And then we will certainly put in there that the Plan Commission has the authority to further restrict the floor area based on the lot size, site characteristics, and off-site impacts. I mean, I think that's the whole point, is to be able to really look at what's happening out on the site and have provisions specified accordingly. Open space is similar in that you can only apply for it if it's non-conforming to size. And again, we have to make sure the wording is correct, but the idea being the footprint of the buildings can't exceed what would be allowed if you met the open space requirements on a conforming lot. So on a conforming RL2 lot, you have to have 7,000 square feet of open space, which would allow somebody to have a 3,000 square foot footprint. We want to make sure that someone isn't offered more than 3,000 square foot footprint on a non-conforming lot. So they can have 4,000 square foot floor area ratio, but only 3,000 square foot footprint. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know at the last meeting, we talked about possibly removing open space, but for that reason alone, it's important to keep it in there. And then again, the Plan Commission has the authority to further restrict open space based on, same thing, lot size, site characteristics, and off-site impacts. Good?
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Setbacks and yard requirements, same kind of thing. You can only get relief from side setbacks, road, shore, if the lot, well, side yard, if the lot's not conforming to width. The only thing that would be different there is if you had an existing lot with a non-conforming structure that's maybe really small and inadequate for today's standards, allowing them to add on as long as they're no more non-conforming than the existing structure. What's interesting about that conversation or important to talk about is, for one, you know, I think the code actually already reads this way, but you shouldn't allow a further encroachment onto the side yard setback. But something I'd like you to think about and give some direction on is, what if somebody has a 900 square foot footprint and it's 5 feet from the lot line, and they want an 1,800 square foot footprint 5 feet from the lot line? Is that appropriate to allow an addition that's no closer, or do you want to have a standard that limits the amount of addition?
Well, wouldn't that would fall into the authority to restrict the open space, or, you know, that relief based on off-site impacts, right? I mean, because you'd be really, I
Yeah.
think where you, because I thought of the same thing, you'd be really thinking about the impact on the neighboring properties as far as maybe obstructing a view of a lake or sun on their patio or something like that. If you just said, well, you've got this 5-foot little extrusion on a house and you just want to continue it down all the way to the edge of the property line, all of a sudden it's like, now you put their pool in the shade next door,
Yeah.
as opposed to just doing something reasonable with your own property that,
Right.
you know what I mean? I think
Yeah.
Yep.
having it fall back then on the authority to further restrict based on site characteristics and offsite impacts. Having that, as long as that is still in there, you're trusting the judgment of the board to
Right, and I think we'll,
not just blanketly restrict the property owner from expanding their property, but letting some judgment fall into play as far as letting them expand their property, but hey, you can't be a total jerk to your neighbor.
Yeah.
You know?
We've had that problem before.
We always do.
Somebody was really upset that lived on the lake.
They were following code though. I mean, so-
Yeah, yeah, but still, it can be a real sticky issue.
so are you comfortable relying on the more general standards for that circumstance? I mean, I can give you an example that we did at the county, is if you were, we actually had, and this gets a little more complicated, but a tiered system for side yard setback. So if you were within 5 feet, you couldn't vertically or laterally expand. If you were between 5 and 10 feet, you could laterally expand, but no more than 50% of the existing building footprint. And then I think if you were more than 10 feet, you could laterally expand as long as you were no closer and it didn't matter on the size, something like that. So it was a tiered system, but I think either way works, because you certainly have the discretion to put restrictions in it. It's what you're comfortable with. And
So Amy, if the minimum side setback's 8 feet, an owner comes to this board, gets a special exception to construct an addition to within 5 feet, but it's a single-story addition. 5 years later, he comes to me and he wants to put a second floor on that addition, and he's getting no closer to the side property line. I'm assuming I should not issue the permit, that he needs to come through here to get another special exception. Is that correct?
yeah, so I think it's probably important to write that in the ordinance, but
Yeah, it's not covered in here.
it is important. So one other thing, if somebody gets a variance for a structure that doesn't conform to the code, they don't have a legal non-conforming structure, they have a variance. So this section actually wouldn't even apply. And I think similarly to what Scott's talking about, if somebody gets a special exception to do something, it should we should probably write it in the code, that doesn't mean you can automatically add on even more. You have to come back to the
Yeah,
plan
that's
commission.
a
I
great
think.
example.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good, that's not in there right
It's
now.
like double dipping.
So Amy, in that respect, does that mean you're going to have language in there saying you only have one shot at this?
No,
Or
I
what?
think,
How are you going to allow, to give notice to the property owner that that's what he or she can or can't do on his example?
yeah, I think with what he was explaining, it would be that if you wanted to propose anything in the future, you have to go back to the plan commission for a special exception. I would be a little hesitant to say that's it, because that's really where the whole variance comes in, is we're giving you minimal relief necessary in order to use your property, and that's what you get. Where this is a little more, you know,
Amy, should a
Free
special
floating.
exception be recorded? So that the future.
That's what I was thinking, because the
Yeah.
next people
Yes.
come in
Yeah,
and
the
think they
buyer-
can put a
Right.
second edition, but are we
yeah.
getting a little,
I think we're doing,
That-
I think we did that with the last one. I think we are
Okay.
doing that.
that's about the only means
But I
to pass
agree.
that on to the next owner.
I almost feel like, because Laura brought up that other issue about the applicants providing substantial evidence, there should almost be a little special exception section with general standards and then the standards that go with these two different issues.
Amy, are variances recorded with the deed?
I think so. I
Can
don't know
we-
if that's in the ordinance or not. I just know Jim drafted a restriction, a special exception restriction for that last one. I mean, I haven't seen any variances, but, and they did record it. So going back to that issue, do you want to leave it more open-ended or be more specific with additions on the side lot line? No closer to the lot line?
I like being specific because then people know what the expectations are.
I kind of go along with that too, because someone comes in and the plan commission might not be thinking like we are right now.
Right.
Thinking, oh, sure, put a second edition on, it's not intruding on anything. I don't know, I think the specifics and recording it.
So I think the next time we come, we'll just bring a little extra language, but
I have another question. If someone obtains a special exception, let's say for side setback, and then 5 years later, they want to tear the house down and rebuild, I'm assuming that special exception is for a specific site and building plan approval, and that when they tear that house down, the special exception goes away.
goes away. You have
It has
conform.
to.
I
Hopefully.
agree, but I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that that
Yep,
occurs.
yep. Well, let's just put when tear down. You have to comply with the ordinance or go back through this.
Yeah.
Correct.
That was good.
What if they tear down those, Scott, and keep the foundation? I'm just thinking,
I think.
Just saw a boathouse that did that.
is there, well, there you go.
And so this gets a little,
We could be here all night with this.
A special exception is based on specific site and building plans. I mean, if someone's coming here asking for a special exception, they're submitting probably a plat of survey and building plans. And I think they're related. They
Linked.
can't be
Linked.
decoupled, you know, in my opinion.
No, it's true.
okay,
Amy, from a process standpoint, in these types of hearings, and we've discussed this in the past, which led up to this issue, it's the burden is on the applicant to establish it fitting within this special exception because it is an exception to a rule. Anybody who comes in to make an exception to a rule, the burden is on that applicant. The question is, to what a level of burden of proof do they have to establish? It's a burden to establish by a certain amount of evidence. That becomes, that's lawyer talk, but at least the applicant knows it's his or her burden
right.
to establish the exception, and I think that should be clarified in the beginning.
And when we had that last special exception, I don't believe there's actually a application form to fill out. And so if we created an application form, it will force them to answer those questions. And we can say, you know, it's similar to a variance application.
Right.
You can't really get here until you're able to fill out the blanks.
Well, and one of the other things we talked about, and I think you're addressing it quite well, and I want to thank you for doing this. There's a lot of detail in it which we need to address further, but one of the issues and distinctions was the discretion for us as a commission, and what we're supposed to do and what we can do. How much discretion do we have, and to what degree? And it looks like, you know, the court of last resort was always the Board of Appeals, because it's unnecessary hardship can get you in a place that you don't have to do here. But I think that this provides some flexibility, but also notice. This is very specific, precise notice to the applicant of what he or she has to do to comply. Will eliminate a lot of what we have to do, so long as they fill it out and know that it's their burden.
One other thing you might want to think about is variances. Everyone within so many feet gets notified. Perhaps when somebody applies for a special exception, the direct neighbors should be notified, or maybe the same notification as a variance. But if you're talking about compatibility with the neighborhood and your neighbors, they probably should be aware of a request that doesn't conform.
So you might want to copy what we have in the boathouse code, because we require that. It's something that's already written, you might want to
Yeah.
copy from. Postcard has to be mailed by a certain time, and
Yeah, okay.
Like a public hearing.
And it's their responsibility, right, for the
Yes.
boathouse one?
no, the city
Or
mails
is it,
it.
oh, the city
Yep.
does? Okay.
Well, and it is a specific factor to consider, and the criteria is surrounding neighborhood, which would include those property owners. So that makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
I mean, if they're smart, they talk to their neighbors about it already, but
Some don't talk.
Yeah,
We've
No, I
seen
think-
that.
that's important. Okay. And then one other consideration, this is, you know, this doesn't have to be done, but would be to provide a maximum amount of relief. So for example, if the lot width is greater than 35 feet but less than 50 feet, the side yard shall be no less than 7 feet. If the lot is 35 feet in width or less, the side yard be no less than 5 feet. Those would be for new structures, not additions. And if that makes you nervous that it's going to be overly restrictive, it's certainly not necessary. It just helps give
so which one is that,
some
Amy?
standards. So I'm still at the bottom of page 2.
Do you want that to reflect then for new structures? So there's no
New
confusion?
new structures, yeah.
I mean, in the wording, do you want?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
we would.
All right.
I don't know, I think maybe a little too restrictive.
Are you saying you would rather not see a number there? Because I think,
What is the offset for RL2, Scott?
8 feet.
8 feet. So that should actually probably read 8. Or it could be if it's non-conforming, no less than 5 feet, or if it's less than 50 feet, take out the 50 to 35. No less than 5. Getting closer than 5 feet from a lot line is getting real close.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you're having a hard time even walking along the side lot line, maintaining the side
Providing drainage.
drainage.
Yeah, just
That's important.
emergency
Yep,
access, all that stuff.
Yeah,
That
I
seems
would-
reasonable to say no less than 5.
no less than
is-
5. Maybe take out the first one.
I think so. I think so. I mean,
Okay. We already talked about this next issue. I did throw in this, like, consider an exception to the provisions unless exceptional circumstances exist to the physical layout. I mean, sometimes there are going to be issues that really force you in a certain location. Maybe there's a wetland on the property or a floodplain that just pushes you.
Could be a
So-
safety issue, a
Are we not-
detached garage right on the road.
What's that?
It could be a safety issue, a
Okay.
detached garage located right on the
we
right
have
of way,
that
which
one.
we had a couple
Just
months
last
ago.
month or so.
I started that one, I liked it.
Okay. You like it?
I do.
Well, I'm going to put a star here. Kent likes it.
Have a gold star to hand out?
I like stickers.
Yeah.
Then the one other provision to consider, it would be rather than the special exception for road and shore setback, consider averaging. I think there was a property, I don't think they ever came in, but they wanted an accessory structure and they were going to be closer than both of their neighbors' structures to the road. And I had just told them, if you move forward, we would really appreciate that your request at least be in line with those neighbors instead of a brand-new structure moving in front of and creating a new pattern that's more non-conforming. So if you were interested, there's a couple different ways you could do this. You could just have an averaging provision without even having to come to you, or you could have an averaging provision with your review and approval, or you don't have it at all, I guess.
Averaging
So-
provision keeps neighbors happy.
Yeah.
So Amy, I have a question on
But
that.
it allows more non-compliance.
It does. So
Right.
maybe it's like, it's part of a special exception like normal, but that you can't go any closer than the average distance or you get pushed to the variance. I mean, you can keep in mind, a variance is still an option.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask you, is that I thought that one of the distinctions between the two is when it's a hardship issue in the variance, and that's talking about exceptional circumstances, really, where it's not practical or there's a difficulty that can't be remedied by other sections in the code. And this one is another section in the code, but it seems to be somewhat of duplication of purpose when I thought we were kind of separating. The person can go to a zoning board of appeals, but you always want to provide an exception in certain ways, but it just seems that this language, I'm just reading it, such as unless exceptional circumstances exist in the physical layout that prevent the property owner from reasonably using the property. That's similar language in the zoning ordinance, the zoning board of appeals variance issue.
Yeah.
Does that just give them the option to do one or the other? Or I thought we were trying to kind of get direction as to which one you go.
Well, I think with that, we're specifically talking about the physical layout, not, I mean, which could be a justification
Right.
for the variance too. But it's also, or has a safety improvement that the city would like to consider, so.
I think the safety, yes, that's an issue, but the other one, I just think, it seems like,
Is the variance?
yeah, and maybe you're saying you can use either one, but we're trying to focus on what we can control in the plan commission because the zoning is not us.
Yeah.
It's outside us.
Well, we can take that out and just do
But
the
the safety
improvement
issue,
safety.
yes.
Yeah, I think, I agree, Jim, because I think it falls into the use of the word reasonably.
Yes.
As opposed to like optimally, like we'd be
Right.
saying, hey, the optimal layout for everyone
Yeah.
is if you just rotated the house by 45 degrees or something like that.
Exactly.
And you'd be intruding all over the place, but everyone would be happy.
Yeah.
Reasonably means, like, they're not letting me do what I should be able to do and I can't enjoy the use of my
Yeah.
property,
Right.
right?
So I think just keep the safety part in though.
It is variance language,
Okay.
so,
Thank
okay.
you.
So where are we at on?
So he went back up a bullet point. The one you liked?
Yeah.
We're taking some of it out.
Your star
The
got
star is gone.
10 star.
It was short-lived.
That one.
Went from gold to 10.
Yeah. Okay, so back to averaging. Any thoughts on averaging?
Yeah, so isn't an example of the averaging one we had recently on Sylvester where they wanted to get closer to the road to put their addition on for their garage? They were taking down their detached garage, attaching the garage to the house, and they needed to be closer to the road than the setback allowed. Am I remembering that right?
No, it's not
No.
correct.
No.
What
No.
they had was
No.
a detached garage within 2 feet of the right-of-way, and they wanted to remove that and replace it with an attached garage that fully complied with all the setback requirements.
It was the same
But I think
dimension
the-
of the house,
I think
right?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I think the floor area was greater.
But he
than-
might
That's
be,
correct.
Kent might be thinking, there was another property a couple houses down who did come in on Sylvester, who did come in and just talk to me about wanting a detached garage close to the road. And I told him that if he's going to propose it, at a minimum, it should be set back to the average of his neighbors.
I don't think
So
that
maybe
was
you
the
think-
one. It was
yeah.
one we were talking about. Their reason for taking down that detached garage was it was so
Safety.
close to the road.
Correct.
Safety.
Yeah.
So they wanted to move it back.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's
So,
why
but
we-
weren't we having a discussion where we were comparing the distance of the other houses along that road? And it actually
Yes.
varied quite a bit.
Yes, they did
Yes.
talk about that.
And this became a safety issue there because it was
Right.
too close to the road.
Right.
But we didn't use averaging on that.
No, we didn't.
We
We
kind
just
of
said-
gave, after looking at the other houses next, on both sides of them, and they had the attached garages.
Right.
And it would bring conformity to that road with everybody with attached garages.
Plus the garage wasn't going to be any wider than the house
Right.
that's
And
there.
we
Yeah.
told them they couldn't use that
Upstairs. They
Right.
couldn't have a big upstairs
Right.
for
Party room.
storage.
But it
Yep.
was the floor area that was the issue.
Yeah.
Right,
It was over the,
But that was
The
because of
limit.
the upstairs.
yep.
right, well,
So-
they still were a little over,
Yeah.
A little bit.
right.
If you do averaging, I would recommend, I would add language that's very specific. It would, whether it be the directly adjacent, the two directly adjacent properties within a certain number of feet on the same side of the road, you'd have to be pretty specific.
So Amy, are you suggesting that averaging should be a right granted in our zoning code or a guideline used by Plan Commission when considering a special exception?
So it could be either way, but I think what I heard was that if it's just a right, then we might encourage more development closer to the road or shore, where in this, if we say it's a special exception and that's your maximum relief,
I agree.
then, that's the standard that the Plan Commission uses in making their review.
And averaging almost always is used exclusively for the street setback, not the shore setback.
Well, she's got it in both.
I have it in both as consideration. You can do what
Right,
you
so
want.
I want to be
but-
consistent, whether it's road or lake, because there's a lot more issues with people on the lake
On
side.
the lake.
Yeah.
In
Why
this
are-
averaging, and so
Why would you,
averaging in my mind just helps to encourage and gives a reason for justifying nonconformity. I'm
think
really struggling with allowing averaging.
I think that falls more along the lines of maybe like a policy statement that, or something that would be a guideline for the Plan Commission to consider on the special exception as opposed to kind of a coded
I
Yeah.
agree.
rule.
And
Where
I-
it's just like,
Yeah.
this is, and I think regardless of how smart we think we are, I think most people would come to that conclusion, in our chair in the future, that, hey, he's like 10 feet worse, he's 5 feet better, I want to be 7.5 feet.
I want to be in the middle.
Yeah, and I think that would be, I think most people come to that conclusion on their own in an application and say, this seems reasonable, looking how it would look. I don't know, as opposed to codifying it.
but
Yeah,
I struggle with the use of averaging for accessory structures. Next thing you know, someone wants to put their new house 20 feet from the lake because the boathouse is 5 feet from
Yeah.
the lake. So it's normally used just for principal structures. And if you extend it to accessory structures, you have a lot of non-conforming sheds near the lake that have been there forever, so they sort of exist. So you have to be careful. I would recommend, first of all, have it not be by right in our zoning code, but as a guideline for this body to consider when granting a special exception. And I think it should only apply to principal structures, but that's up to this body.
Yeah. I would,
Or principal structure should be compared to other principal structures.
yeah. And that would be, like,
Right.
use a a structure with a similar use would be important, but the detached structures is common on the road. That would be the only caution with not allowing it on accessory structures. It's often used for detached, but I'm getting the impression them to maybe just scratch it and use it as a general standard.
In the averaging, if you had two houses that were set back and a third house in the middle on the lake, that was within code to build up to whatever, 75 feet?
Yeah.
Could they still do that?
Yeah.
Or would there be an averaging rule in place
No,
today?
right now, they could do it.
And even after this. And
Yeah.
they can build up to the 75 feet. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter whether your neighbor built it 150 feet. If the code is 75, you can build to the 75.
And this was just a standard to use on non-conforming lots when they can't fit a structure
Right.
in, so that.
Yeah,
There's
because
an
some people
al-
have been shocked. All the houses along their thing are 150 feet. Somebody tears down what's there and builds at 75,
Yeah.
blocks a third of their view, and they're like, how can they do that? Well, it complies with the code.
Yeah, I know an alderman who suggested, just brought it up for discussion at the city council level, and he get his head handed to him. It was
Trying
me.
to
It was
get an
me.
averaging.
It was you.
You handed
It was you?
No, it was me that I got, so I suggested that we just consider the topic of whether we should look at existing properties and maybe draw some lines as far as bringing that 50-foot setback back to where some existing structures are. And it was pretty quickly dismissed as being a horrible idea
And that's,
So, the-
Oh,
by
geez.
residents and other council members alike.
it's difficult because often you're comparing the shore setback to a cottage that's only
Correct.
1,000 square feet.
And it's just, people said, hey, you know, some of the people with the cottages right now today say, look at what this guy did to my enjoyment of the lake. However, some other people with the same cottages are saying, you put that restriction on my cottage and you've just destroyed the property value that I have when I resell this and someone wants to tear it down. So I get it, and so it died a quick death as far as discussion, and people just, if you want to do it, the method, I think, is to enter into mutual deed restrictions with your existing neighbors if you want to preserve what you have. Right? I mean, you could all voluntarily go to the county and say, these 5 houses, we're drawing a line here, no development beyond it. And then it's one tie, all tie for the future development.
and I believe that's what the Rails just did on their CSM. They added a deed restriction of the
Maybe that's something we
neighborhood.
could advertise for people on our site somehow, as far as here's a way to, if you
Do
love
it.
what you have, you can lock arms with your neighbors, but it just takes one weak link and you're gonna have it in every group of 4
Yeah.
people in a row, just like what happened with dredging.
I think you'll find owners that would love to restrict properties other than their own.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Oh, yes. And
Mike.
Gee.
the town of Delafield
That's
does
what it
do
comes down to.
reverse averaging. Were you aware of that?
No.
They do reverse averaging up to 150 feet from the lake. So it's kind of interesting. Okay, any other questions on side yard, road, floor area, and open space? We are proposing to just remove height from an allowance because there's really no justification to allow a special exception just because you have a non-conforming lot. Good?
Yep.
Okay?
Our height restrictions are pretty liberal.
Yeah.
I mean, you can build
They
are.
tall buildings.
Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine it'll become an issue, is an issue. You've probably never seen it come up.
Is that true, Scott?
It only comes up with big houses on big lots, and we don't have many of those.
Maybe Giannis will come here.
So you need a big tall house on a big lot?
Well, a big wide house with a 10, 12 roof pitch,
10-foot
the roof system
ceilings.
gets pretty tall, and we have a few of those, just,
Yeah.
they're existing, so.
Okay. Oh, and then there's just a general catch-all statement that, again, that you have the authority to impose restrictions based on the site conditions and the neighborhood, okay?
And that's just special exceptions, you're not saying that,
That's all special
Yeah.
exceptions. Everything we just talked about relates to a special exception.
Amy, one other comment is, so a special exception cannot be used on a non-conforming use. For me, that's a wet
Right.
boathouse. So that's a non-conforming use, and I just want to make sure that someone doesn't try to use that as a mechanism to get around other regulations.
No.
Okay,
The special exceptions are only allowed under these 2 circumstances.
okay.
And I think actually, like, the wet boathouse, there's a specific provision in the ordinance too.
And the DNR doesn't allow them. So,
Okay, so then moving on to the lake frontage requirements. So when I started, I got a little confused, so I kind of want to clean this up regardless. So you have a lake frontage or shore frontage requirement in each zoning district. And then you have a lot width requirement, which when they're on the lake is measured at the shore setback. And then there's a separate section, lake frontage, I believe it is, lake frontage and something, where it kind of combines the two. It's actually the width of the lot gets increased to 150 feet at the shore setback, not at the lake frontage, but the title is lake frontage, so it's confusing.
So the big picture story on that is if you do the setback, it's more restrictive. If you do the shoreline, it's less restrictive, in most cases.
And then if you, you look at the table, because there's a summary table in the code, it says that you go from, let's, for example, RL1, you go from 150 feet to 150 feet on a new lot. It's in the minimum lake frontage column, not the lot width. So I guess what I need direction from you is, do you want it measured at the shore setback? This has been a topic of conversation with you in the past. So is it meant to be at the shore setback or at the shore frontage? If it's supposed to be at the shore setback, then let's just use lot width at the shore setback instead of using the term shore frontage. Shore frontage is defined in your code as being at the shore. So that would be one question.
I have a question. I've never understood because I don't live on the lake, when they mean the shoreline. Where exactly and how do they determine where the shoreline is?
It's a meandering line. So in some cases, it's perfectly straight. In other ones, you could have a jut out and it could meander. So
Is it where the water meets?
the water meets the land.
Ground.
It's
Yep.
actually measured at the technical
High water.
term is
High
the
water.
ordinary high water mark, which
Yeah.
is where the water
Okay.
normally stands at a given,
Right.
I mean, there's a
Yeah.
technical way of finding that elevation.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to know because I never
Yeah.
understood that.
Yeah.
So oftentimes it is meandering, and so you're going to get a greater shore frontage measurement than you would at the shore width measuring perpendicular to the side lot lines. Not always, but most of the time that is going to be the case. So if it's the goal to be more restrictive and to limit development on the lake, you may want to stick to, it looks like the intent of the code was to measure it at the shore setback. I just want to make sure that that's clear throughout the different sections. With that said, a shore frontage standard is usually measured at the shore, so.
I don't know. Just general comment, I think 150 is a wide lot. And I guess I'd rather, if we're going to make a choice, I'd rather be a little less restrictive where applicable and use the shoreline high water mark. But
And the DNR has minimum standards for unincorporated areas, which are generally more rural than your cities and villages. Their minimum standard is 100 feet and 65 feet for sewer lots. So your code is quite a bit more restrictive than even those standards.
Yeah, I think shore setback makes sense for that when you're thinking about where I'm just thinking more of like peninsulas and stuff. We don't have this many places where we're able to, who's divvying up 150-foot chunks of land along any
only
lake
on the
right
east
now.
side of Lake Dagowica and
We've hit the stuff on Upper Neshota's been done.
Neshota, yeah, that's what I was
That's all, it's not all done. I
Oh,
mean, Neshota, who knows what the future of Neshota
Yeah,
House holds for the next 50
exactly.
years. They're healthy, but I mean,
could change.
it makes sense to have it at the because it is that's a pretty decent sized lot. I mean, it makes sense to have it short frontage because then you could have a cul-de-sac on a peninsula and yeah. Anyways, I think you're trying to protect the lake shore frontage because these are lake lots. You're not trying to. Anyways, I've said enough. I think the shore frontage makes sense for that measurement.
Do you want me to move forward with text that includes strike the width and measure it at the true shore frontage,
Yeah,
which
but
is
the high water
defined in your
mark.
ordinance?
I think so. I don't know. How
Sure.
Many
Yeah.
everybody
Yeah,
else.
At the setback?
And that's how I actually explained it to the Reals when they first came in, because when you look at shore frontage and then you read the definition, that's how it would read. But then there's the lot width. In every district, it says lot width, 150 feet on the lake property. So we'll have to change that. I am also recommending an exclusion of this for when lands are transferred from one property owner to another, provided the lot width requirement of the underlying zoning district is complied with and no additional lots are created. So this would also impact what came to you as a special exception on that rail property. So they were just adjusting the interior lot line. There's no greater impact, there's no new lot, no intensification of use. Good?
Might be 20 years before that happens again, right?
The term additional lots helps a lot as opposed to saying new lot, because they created 2 new lots but no additional lots.
Right.
Right.
Yes, very important word. And then we just beefed up, there were no standards at all for the Plan Commission to use when granting a special exception for lake frontage. So we're adding this paragraph. It is still a little bit subjective. This is one of those things where, you have to assess the scenario and determine whether or not there's any greater impact on the neighborhood, shore. One consideration would to not allow a special exception at all. It's kind of hard to, if you're saying you need 150 feet of shore frontage because you don't want an impact, it's kind of hard to say that granting less than that won't have a more negative impact. I don't know, it's difficult. I would say the only circumstance where it would probably really apply is if the use is less intense than the previous use. Is everyone okay with this paragraph? Do you want to move forward with what we have in here? The Plan Commission may grant a special exception to the restrictions contained herein, provided the approval meets the terms of a special exception as defined in this ordinance, and provided there are no impacts on adjoining or nearby properties in the surrounding neighborhood or natural resources of the lake, including drainage, water quality, wildlife, and aquatic habitat, and the proposal does not impact pier and navigation rights of adjoining riparian properties.
Could you say, instead of just no impacts, no undesirable impacts?
Where do I have that?
That's right at
Yeah.
the beginning. So otherwise, because there's going to be an impact.
Right.
True.
Just no
It
undesirable.
basically negates any of them.
Yeah, no, that's good, because that does actually, that does help a lot.
Yeah.
And then the lot width shall not be reduced below the required lot width of the underlying zoning district.
Did you say?
Well, that
desirable?
won't even apply anymore if we switch the
Did
code.
you say undesirable or detrimental?
Well, undesirable.
Okay.
I mean, because
Adverse.
it's subjective to the board,
It's pretty
right?
subjective,
Yeah, I mean, it'd be up to.
more than detrimental,
Right.
if that's what you want.
I think so.
Any other questions on special exceptions? We have more to talk about, but
Okay.
special exceptions. Hearing none? Okay. Then we have this is a topic that honestly I think the practice has probably been to not require a conditional use, but if you read it literally, the ordinance says that any new, extended, changed, or continued use of a building or premise that is classified as a conditional use requires approval of a new or amended conditional use. And I've been having folks come in and they are proposing Shops of Nagawaki.
Nagawaki and a new,
Would be a good example. You've got all these different uses. They comply with the zoning district. They're all business uses, one business converting to another business. Technically, if they're changing the use, they should go back through a new CU, but their use is permitted by right. The only reason why they have a CU is because it's part of a planned development to have that uniform appearance and look. So
it's a bureaucratic nightmare.
yeah, what I'm recommending is that if a planned development use has been granted for the development of a parcel in order to ensure the implementation of a comprehensive and cohesive unified development plan, individual uses within the development can be modified without the need for a revised conditional use permit, provided the individual uses are permitted by right in the underlying zoning district and provided the uses are not in conflict with the conditions of the conditional use agreement all other provisions of the ordinance apply. You know, for example, Penzies, and I hope they don't leave, but let's just say something like that, turn into a restaurant. Technically, they would need to go through a CU, and that seems pretty silly, because obviously that's what that area is for.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep.
And if that original plan development CU has specific conditions and it doesn't allow, because you can certainly prohibit a use that's normally permitted by right as part of a plan development if you want to, then we would make sure that that obviously gets honored.
It's a good change.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, so how about when we've got a, I guess who makes the call if it's a permitted, if it fits in? Is it?
So that would be if it's listed in the, like,
Business plan of
B6
operation.
uses, professional offices, restaurants, service. I mean, each district lists out the permitted uses. It would have to be clearly listed.
Okay, all right. I'm
Does that-
thinking of there's a CBD store that was coming in.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
I think that just raised a flag specific to that.
That was the
development.
business plan of operations.
You're right.
I don't
Okay.
think the current planner even thought about reading the rules the way Amy is reading them, because that's what they read.
Yeah, and
Right.
they would still have to go through a business plan and site plan review, so
Okay.
you would still see it.
We'd see it,
Yeah.
okay, all right, good.
So Amy, can we apply that logic or procedure to conditional uses on residential properties? For example, there's a conditional use that covers 2 properties because of number of horses kept. So very appropriate, but on one of the houses, they come to me for a deck or a pool,
Oh, yeah.
and because it's a change in site plan, they had to come through here and get an amended conditional use. And it was really, I
Oh.
thought, heavy-handed. If it's material to the conditional
It
use,
was.
Yes.
definitely should come here. But if
No,
it's
it shouldn't
not
come
material
here.
to the conditional use, it shouldn't come here.
No, right. Yeah, if that's the way it's being interpreted, then the planned development term might need to be expanded upon to include other CUs where it's, the proposal is non-material to the CU.
Or
Preferably
just-
the best.
I would even just take some guidance from Plan Commission, so you
Yeah.
can keep this nice and simple the way it's worded.
Yeah, I mean, the best case scenario is when that CU is granted, it has a condition in there that says the CU is for the horse operation components only. The residential uses are permitted as, I don't know, permitted by right. I mean, preferably you put the stuff in the documents.
So is the conditional use review determination approval, is that mentioned in any of those documents? Or at least reference to the conditional use factors that are considered? It would be in an agreement that's in here that you mentioned, which you proposed.
So this is part of this would be part of the ordinance.
Right.
If a future planned development conditional use came in, I would recommend language that
Okay.
also clarified it. But this is to even include old planned developments where none of that kind of language is in there. If somebody comes in and they want to convert a restaurant to an office in a business district, I would tell them that they need a business plan of operation, not a conditional use,
Okay.
is the goal.
Yeah, that's,
Yeah, that's what I was clarifying. Thanks.
Yeah. That makes it easier.
Okay.
And then, so just keep in mind with some of this stuff, that, like the variance, the whole variance thing, and the non-conforming, there was something, we missed a section. Where is it? Non-conforming lots. Not non-conforming lots.
It's not in the packet.
Existing? Existing non-conforming?
Yes, where is that?
That's on the
Structures?
first page of your report at the bottom.
No, okay, I think I took it out.
Oh,
Just below I know I took it out, because I think if we change this language, it may not be necessary. But in the ordinance, just before non-conforming lots is a section on non-conforming structures. And it conflicts with the standards under non-conforming lots. And so I was just gonna add that that section on non-conforming structures only applies if the lot is conforming, and that if the lot is non-conforming, you go to the section that we've just been talking about tonight. But it's possible we won't even need to touch it because I think these provisions are going to address it. But if we do, I'm just going to do it. I don't think it's something we have to talk about because it will just make sense. So what I was going to say was actually just that we're doing what we can to address these issues, but it doesn't mean we won't come back into these sections and touch them even more. And for example, that whole variance section needs to be updated, and so we might have to keep coming back a little bit, just so you know.
Yeah, so thank you very much for going through that, and I'll just reiterate, as Amy reviews our code and comes across these and different applications hang up, we're creating a list, and we're trying to take the top priority ones and work them through the system, right? So I appreciate you bringing your thinking caps on, but it's going to save us all and our future planning commission members time as we move forward. And it's not as bad as recodification, right? I mean, we're taking smaller pieces. Hopefully the most impactful pieces, to tell you the truth. Great, thank you very much.
Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.
I don't know if this will come back next month for consideration, possibly the following. We'll have to put it in code.
Only so many billable hours a month, Amy.
I don't, it's
Is that what
fixed,
it
it's
comes
fixed.
down
I don't get
She's capped.
extra. I
She's
don't-
capped.
I'm capped.
Is that why we have this in front of us?
Yeah, I think so.
No.
She's fixing that.
Okay,
It needed-
so I believe we're on to number 7?
8.
Or 8, I'm sorry, I didn't put a line through that. 8, reports of city officials, clerk, planning commission meeting dates and deadlines. Next meeting is October 28th, 2020. Meeting submittal deadline is October 13th, 2020. I'll refer you to correspondence. Planner, discuss November and December meeting dates.
Okay, so if you look on the screen, right now on the calendar, the November Plan Commission meeting date is scheduled for the 25th, which is the week of Thanksgiving. Do you have any interest in bumping it up to the Wednesday before, which I believe is previous practice? Is
Yep,
that
that's
correct?
typically what we do.
Absolutely.
We won't
18th?
interfere with anybody else, will we? Any other
18th?
meetings that
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
We won't interfere with any other
No.
that are scheduled.
Nope.
Okay. No, I don't have a problem with
So we're good with the 24th? Or I'm sorry, the
18th.
18th?
18th
18th.
of November with the deadline of the 3rd.
Sure.
And, depending on volume,
Yeah.
because that'll be a little bit of a switch of dates. If something trickles in that week a little bit late, we can, potentially be more flexible.
Okay.
Same with December, I believe the meeting date would be the 30th.
You want to keep it on the
So, I
30th?
don't know.
Typically, we skip the December meeting
Why don't you
unless
leave-
there's business.
Why don't we wait till next month and make that decision?
Oh, would we know? We won't know until, maybe October.
So maybe we schedule it for the 30th?
I'd say leave it and subject to being canceled based
Yeah.
on lack of business and
Right.
just try to have staff kind
Yeah,
of
we-
refer around it.
We will try not to have that one, but if there's urgent business, then there really isn't a better date, right? We'd have to move it up 2 weeks.
Not as much travel in Christmas this time.
Yeah.
Oh, you'd be
Does
surprised.
that make sense to the majority?
Yeah, I think we
Yeah.
should go
Say
that
leave
way.
it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, see, building inspector. So
Nothing to
much
re-
activity. I see all these trucks, all this building, nothing completed?
We're not building.
Not building. Okay.
Not a
Nothing to
lot of that. There's a lot of that going on.
Okay, item number 9. Seeing no further business, we are adjourned at the time of
8:32 information.
8:32.